So it always amazes me, and I really mean that. It always amazes me when the thoughts that I humbly happen to pull and try to connect into a message to bring you have already been spoken and have already been linked to the daily word, to what I heard again on Being, the radio broadcast this morning, what I heard in the news. I literally wrote before looking at the daily word, so I didn't look at the daily word beforehand. This is the first time I've been preaching in 2.5 years, so again, it is such a treat to be here. I had to come home first, so thank you. So it's so interesting to me that when we pull our thoughts, that we think just our thoughts, that they are truly reflected in a more connected universe, in a human spiritual partnership. And I think that today, more than ever, we each need to be sourcing what that partnership looks like and where we find the strength to reach out and be in partnership with each other, with God, with the earth, when we are exhausted. I am exhausted. I have come through a couple of challenging years that have had bright spots, but also some bumps. And I imagine that everybody sitting here has come through an experience of the last couple of years that have had bumps that you didn't anticipate. And so in those bumpy times, I am hoping that you remembered that your spiritual freedom, your capacity to come back, the very definition of resilience, is to be able to come back from those challenges and to move within and source strength to move through what appears to be struggle. I will also tell you that it is so interesting to me, again, to not even remember, or so I thought, as I was writing this morning and thinking about notes and structure, that we were singing Dreamed of Rain. I suggested it. I've sung it many times. Didn't remember that we were singing it. And in it, it talks about freedom and the moon rising. And the opening line of my talk as I was holding it was to tell you about last night. The opening line was, speaking of the moon. So the moon was full. And I went to find it last night twice. So my husband Edwin and I moved from one place in Belmont, Massachusetts, to another place about 2 miles down the road. And now we live close to playing fields. So there's a lot of green and a lot of space, which is exquisite. It gets noisy at soccer time because there are thousands of kids. They're not the noisy ones. There are also thousands of parents. There literally are signs for the Belmont Soccer League that say, play nice, coaches are people too, respect is important. Really, they were like kindergarten rules, and I love the fact that they post these. So we've got these playing fields, and last night I remembered, I think it's either the full moon or it's a little bit beyond or a little bit before. I can never exactly keep track. So I ran out after watching 3.5 hours of the Eurovision Song Contest, which was amazing. I'll say more about that. And I ran out to see the moon. I couldn't find it. And I gave it about 20 minutes, and I ran back out. And I walked around, and if you saw me, you might have thought I looked a little bit odd because I'm doing this. And I'm trying to remember, I know that the sun comes up there because I've been out here in the morning. And so if the sun comes up there, does the moon, I think the moon comes up the same way. This is really the conversation I had with myself last night. Where would the moon come from? And I will tell you, I went out 3 times, never saw the moon. But I believe the moon was there. Does anybody here doubt that the moon was there? This is a conversation we could have. Everyone, no judgment, total love, if for some reason you don't. So here's the point. We don't see the moon when the clouds are in front of the moon, but we don't actually doubt its presence. Yeah? And if we take that logic and we apply it to spiritual principles inside of unity and every other spiritual tradition, that there is some spark within us, some part of us that actually knows at a deep level that we are part of everything else, that we are in a partnership from the moment we are born, from the moment we step into a church or out of a church, from the moment someone explains to us, there's something a little bit larger, even if that is to look up and know that the moon is there even if you don't see it. Here's what I wonder. What if our faith were as powerful as the faith we have that the moon is there regardless? So that in the last couple of years, and is in the time that will follow, and in the time that is unfolding right this minute, in all sorts of places in the world that are in strife, including our own communities. What if our faith in something larger, in light, in God, in hope, were as irrefutable within ourselves as our belief that we do not question the moon is present in the heavens, even when the clouds obscure our vision? What would that mean? I really want you to think about that for a moment for yourself. What would that actually mean we were capable of? If we were able, if we were able to source into that place on a regular basis, we might know what to do when faced with opposition, when faced with the appearance of polarity, when faced with a contrary opinion, when faced with information that says, as it did for many people over the last couple of years, you aren't going to be able to make a living, you might actually get sick, it could be serious, you may lose someone. And the doom scrolling that started in, January of 2020, that started to take all of us down as we were desperate for real information, so we felt connected. I don't think I'm the only person here today who was obsessed with the news for quite a while, because what we're living through are very unprecedented times, and that word is terribly overused. But let me tell you something, folks. Life has gotten interesting like this many, many, many times. And the only way that I think humanity came through it is, again, by sourcing what is true. That there is an immutable, irrefutable space within you. As I have said before when visiting you, I call that the space for grace. There is a space for grace that is there built as a receptacle, like a holy umbilical cord that doesn't get cut at birth. In fact, it grows stronger, that cord. But guess what? You have to work at it. It does not come easy, as they say in many church basements that I have sat in. It is a one-day-at-a-time process for understanding your own personal responsibility on that road. It is not every morning that I wake up fully connected to God, wanting to sing to the world. In fact, I would say it's maybe 2 out of 7 in a given week. So what I need to do is through meditation, medication, and all sorts of other tools I have at the ready, including looking up at the sky and the birds and the moon. I need to use all of that to move from what feels like an uncentered place, again, victim or present with the chaos around me in a way that doesn't feel holy and right and good and that allows me to be at my best, and to move through that time to be able to get to a new place. Many of you, I would imagine, like me, have played with the idea of exercise in different ways over the years, and that probably has shifted as it has for me over the years. And so I don't do CrossFit anymore, because people told me at 58, maybe that's not the greatest idea. unless you do it perfectly right, and as Jack and Oriana know, I don't follow the rules all the time. So I gave up CrossFit. I am called back to yoga, but I'm afraid because I really want to do it perfectly. But I do want to get back to yoga. But here's what I know about exercise, no matter what it is, whether it's a walk around the pond, whether it's a walk on the beach, whatever it looks like. The first 5 minutes suck. You'll excuse me. The first 5 minutes, you are thinking all sorts of interesting thoughts. Usually they are, stop. Just stop. You're an adult, Adam. Nobody is forcing you into this. That bed is so comfortable. Go back. And through that, I have to come into a different mindset. And for me, seriously, it is about looking up. Even remembering the last time that I did that, yesterday morning or last night, I feel emotion rise in me. Because what happens for me is I realize I am part of something larger. And you've heard this again and again and again. But that is the truth. You are in holy communion, if you will, and partnership with what within unity we may call God or the Christ light. Welcoming every path means that we don't decide what shade that light is for you. We don't decide what lens is over that light, whether it's cloudy or clear. What we believe is that we come together to understand that in community we are strongest, but only if each of us take personal responsibility for feeling the rain, for sensing into that peace, and then for sharing it. And I believe over time, in my own life, that the piece that is often missing for me, and maybe for some others, in the New Thought tradition, is the way in which we turn our individual responsibility and spiritual practices into service in the world. Now, this is a congregation that I adore for many reasons. One reason is that you all get that there is a way to serve. But in spiritual communities, this one and others that I have served, often that looks like a very prescribed experience. So it looks like the change. It looks like the effort to do the parking lot. It looks like any of the healing ministries that each of you are committed to here. Terrific. And, because life is a both and experience, there are other opportunities to serve, I would imagine, because this is true for my own life, that you are not stepping into. And I spent the last 2.5 years thinking about what really was my message in the world. And I look out at other denominations, and I look out at sometimes evangelical Christian groups, and I think about the fact that if everything moves in the direction that many people imagine that it will in our civil and uncivil society, that this wedding ring could mean nothing. I recognize that the movement in our society, which is shifting things quickly, calls for those of us who have spent even 30 seconds thinking about love and how to share it, that our responsibility is to take new action. And I keep asking mentors and other ministerial friends, well, wait, what does that look like? Because I want a prescribed recipe, just like each of you. To be a good person, what does that look like? And so I'm an ordained minister, and I have some cool ideas, and sometimes those ideas are helpful and useful. But what is my job now? And at one point I thought about that. And it's like a drum roll. And in one occasion, I thought about that, and I was taking a walk with a minister friend. And I very excitedly said, I know, Peter, just tell me exactly what it looks like, as if he had a crystal ball that he'd looked at an hour earlier. I said, I want to know, and this is what I said, Am I supposed to be gathering people in church basements and teaching them some kind of spiritual CrossFit? Am I supposed to be gathering people together so that we can march over to the Christian Landmark Revival Church, though I know nothing about their theology or their people and their hearts? I know that my husband on occasion has removed stickers from our evangelical church in Belmont that feel contrary to our values. You know, he sort of said, grab that one there. Not from individual property and cars, just so we know. But it's an action. That's my point. We need to be finding actions that we take. And here's what I know are the most powerful actions. It is to figure out how you step into a different kind of spiritual courage later this afternoon. It's in you perhaps making a phone call to someone with a different political affiliation. It's you, or in my case, me, reaching out to my stepmother, who comes, as I've probably said from this pulpit before, from a very different spiritual construct, one that doesn't make sense to me, but here's what's true. Those of us who have done some work on the path to expand and try to connect, whatever that has looked like for us, understand that the highest spiritual and intellectual capacity resides in the ability to hold more than one truth, more than one interpretation, more than one story. And here's what I have seen play out in the last 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, 5 years, 20 years. There is less and less space for grace between people and between organizations, inside of politics and religion and literally day-to-day conversation. We have a hard time finding that space. And I know this because for a living, I talk to people in the corporate and academic world about what I would call their inability in the moment to see another take. And even offering that to very senior managers who make a lot more money than I do and have a lot more letters after their name. When I say things like, well, before you spoke with her, when you were doing that performance review or having an important conversation, did you consider that her viewpoint might also be valid? And often I can move into a space with people of some truth-telling, and often I will hear, no, what do you mean? What do you mean? I love when I hear, what do you mean? And I think, what do you mean, what do you mean? And we go back and forth because literally my construct doesn't match that. I believe that we start with questions. And when I even suggest that, or these days I'm a little bit stronger because I believe that we need to get stronger. When I say, wait, when you had that conversation that was really important, I don't know, with your wife or with your boss, or when your boss had it with you and there was a power differential, do you remember any questions that your boss asked you? And oftentimes, silence. And when I sit with the boss, who I'm often coaching, I say, when you went and met and had that meeting, did you ask any questions? Were you curious? Was there an openness to another take? And again, I often get either furious note-taking because it seems like the most brilliant thing they've ever heard, and maybe it is, or I get an oppositional glance, which tells me there's a construct going on, which is part of, we're all enabling or have enabled for years, which is that those in power have the right answers. So therefore, they're not asking any questions. We are in trouble when we lose our curiosity. When we look up at the sky and we wonder, why is it more cloudy today over time? Why is it 84 degrees today? I don't remember a May day like this that was 84 degrees. I'm going to look at the history books. Oh, wow, there haven't been. And what we too often do is we tune into Netflix, we tune out with whatever substance appeals to us, and we stop looking up. We stop paying attention. So I will tell you, I went to McDonald's on the exit, used to be exit 5. I can never remember what it's called now, right? When I come here and I stop at the One Service Plaza. And I went in to get coffee, and I had just been listening to On Being with Krista Tippett, and she was interviewing a woman who's a botanist. I will not give you her name because I can't remember it in the moment. Exquisite book about moss. She's written a book about moss. And it's literally titled something sort of academic, like The History and Alchemy of Moss Through the Ages. That's not exactly it, but it's something like that. And I thought, how interesting. What she was really talking about, the fact is that moss is incredibly collaborative and knows itself to be part of a network. And so I'm thinking this as I go in to get my coffee. It's the ritual coming down here, driving from Boston. And I realized that I had some spark this morning that moved me to grab a travel mug. And I thought, oh, I washed it. I have the travel mug. So I walked in with this. I have never done this before in a McDonald's. Maybe I've done it in a Starbucks. Again, maybe a safe space where I think somebody in Cambridge won't scream at me if I ask them to put the coffee directly in the mug. Like, that's not so wild. So I thought, okay, am I going to do this? And I stood at the counter. And a lovely woman came over and she asked me what I wanted, but it was obvious she wasn't the one who was going to take care of that. She looked over at another younger gentleman and gave him not so much a command, but said, medium hot coffee was the order. And he looked a little confused, and he found his way over to the coffee. He was doing 6 other things because they're constantly multitasking because they're forced to. Really challenging. And so I'm blessing that that isn't my gig in the moment and how hard that must be. And that's creating some space for grace between the two of us. And he looks at me, and this was the moment. I thought, I'm really nervous about doing this, but I think I'm going to ask him to put the coffee directly in the mug. Oh, I don't think I'm going to do it. I'm not going to do it. No, I'm not going to do it. It's going to be weird. People are going to look at me. They're going to say, no, they must have regulations. They can't do that. Who would do that? McDonald's doesn't do that. All of this went through my head. I could have been thinking loftier thoughts. This is what I was thinking. And I looked right at him, and I showed him the mug. And I said, could you put it directly in this? He didn't even say anything. He just did this, went to the coffee, filled it to the brim, right, all the way up, and it's a big mug, brings it back, and I am telling you, I can't even explain what was happening. But there was a communication between the two of us that wasn't about the coffee. There was a gentleness in his eyes, and I gave it back. He was probably all of 16 or 17. And I thought, I did it. I saved the planet. I saved all the moss in the country. We're good now. Everything's cool. Really, I thought some of that. I was so proud that this tiny little step I had taken. And then I turned, and I heard his manager, not the woman who had spoken to me first, a woman who actually came out. There's a huge crew at this McDonald's in this service plaza. She came out, and she looked at the younger guy, and she said, oh, we don't do that. Yeah, we don't do that. What we do is we give I listened to this. I sort of stood to hear it. She said, what we do is we give a cup, and then, the customer, I was going to say client in my world, the client at McDonald's would then decide, what they put the coffee in. And I wanted to turn around and say, I know, but that's beside the point. Don't you want to save the moss? Don't you have full authority here to make a different decision? But instead of engaging in that conversation, I'm bringing it to you. I walked away happy that I hadn't killed that little bit of moss to have my medium-sized coffee. I bring that up because it was an opportunity for me to source spiritual courage to have a different kind of interaction that may lead to a different result. I do not believe, even as I am in one part of my humanness terrified about the light and the dark and the opposition that seems to be building. I will tell you, as I've said before from this pulpit, I became ordained about 12 years ago because I sensed that the world was going to get messy and that I had a voice, spoken and sung, and I could help people just remember that when you are at McDonald's, and you can make a different choice, that our work is to wake up and to look up and simply smell the coffee together. This is what we can do. In these times, it is our responsibility, in order to find freedom, which I believe we all want, to spend the time to figure out what that looks like for you and what you can truly do today, in this moment, this afternoon, tomorrow at work, with your kids, or at McDonald's. Knowing this is the path not only to freedom, but to remembering that the moon will not leave us, and that the clouds here today will pass, for we are connected to the moon, not the clouds. And so I invite you now into a moment of meditation to simply let those words, wherever they lead you and your heart, here in the sanctuary or at home, simply take a breath and breathe out. And imagine this morning that you are breathing into your own space for grace, knowing that you have an even deeper capacity at the ready when you walk out of here today. And so it is. Amen.
You have been watching the message from our Sunday celebration service here at Unity on Cape Cod, providing a positive path for spiritual living. Please join us every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. at 147 Walton Ave, Hyannis, Mass., and visit us online at unityoncapecod.org. This video was made possible in part through a grant from Unity Worldwide Ministries and the Templeton Foundation.